Karen Sullivan thought she could terrorize my family forever. She shot my 5-year-old daughter Emma through our glass door because the child wouldn't open it for a stranger. Big mistake. Karen didn't know she just attacked the district attorney's family. Now she'll pay the ultimate price. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. My daughter spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Those were the longest, most agonizing weeks of our lives. Emma underwent 4 surgeries total to repair the extensive damage to her leg. The bullet had shattered her femur into 7 pieces, and each surgery required delicate work to reconstruct the bone properly. The first surgery was the most critical, stopping the bleeding and stabilizing the fractures. The second surgery involved inserting metal plates and screws to hold the bone fragments together. The third surgery repaired damaged muscle tissue and blood vessels. The fourth surgery was necessary when doctors discovered additional bone fragments that needed to be removed. Between surgeries, Emma lay in her hospital bed looking so small and fragile, surrounded by machines and tubes. Her left leg was elevated in traction, and she had to remain completely still to allow the bones to heal properly. For an active 5-year-old who loved to run and play, this forced immobility was almost as traumatic as the shooting itself. "When can I go home, Daddy?" Emma asked me every day, her voice weak and tired. "I want to play with my toys. I want to sleep in my own bed." Sarah and I took turns staying with Emma around the clock. We read her favorite books, played quiet games, and tried to keep her spirits up. But we could see the light fading from our daughter's eyes. The happy, carefree child who used to dance around our living room was gone, replaced by a frightened, hurting little girl who jumped at every sound. The physical wounds were just the beginning of Emma's suffering. She developed severe PTSD from the attack, something no 5-year-old should ever have to experience. She refused to be alone in any room and would panic at loud noises. The sound of our doorbell would send her into hysterics, reminding her of that terrible day when Karen came pounding on our door. Even in the hospital, Emma would wake up screaming from nightmares about the mean lady. She would cry for hours, asking us over and over why someone would want to hurt her. "Is the mean lady going to come back?" Emma asked me one night, her eyes wide with terror as she clutched Mr. Peanuts. "Is she going to hurt me again? Did I do something really, really bad?" I held my daughter close, promising her that Karen would never hurt her again. But inside, I was consumed with a rage that threatened to destroy everything I had worked for. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that sometimes adults do terrible things for no good reason? The hospital staff was incredible during Emma's stay. Nurses would bring her coloring books and small toys. Child psychologists came to help her process the trauma. Physical therapists worked gently with her to prevent muscle atrophy while she healed. But watching Emma in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines and fighting to heal from wounds that should never have existed, broke something inside me. This vibrant, joyful child who used to fill our house with laughter could barely move without crying in pain. Dr. Williams kept us updated on Emma's progress, but the news wasn't always encouraging. The damage to her leg was more extensive than initially thought. Even with all the surgeries and therapy, Emma would likely have chronic pain and mobility issues for the rest of her life. "She's going to need ongoing physical therapy for at least 2 years, Dr. Williams explained. And she'll probably need additional surgeries as she grows. The metal plates will need to be adjusted or replaced as her bones develop." The medical bills were staggering even with our insurance. Surgery costs, hospital stays, medications, and upcoming therapy sessions would cost over $200,000. But money was the least of our concerns. We would have paid any amount to take away Emma's pain and trauma. During those long hospital nights, I found myself thinking about revenge. As a district attorney, I had always believed in justice through the legal system. But sitting beside my wounded daughter, listening to her cry in pain, I understood for the first time why some people take justice into their own hands. If I had encountered Karen during those first few days, I'm not sure I could have controlled myself. The rage was so intense that it scared me. I had to remind myself constantly that Emma needed her father to be strong and focused on her recovery, not consumed with thoughts of vengeance. #HOA Karen shoots my 5-year-old daughter in the legs for not opening the door, unaware I'm a district attorney. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across our quiet suburban street when my world shattered into a million pieces. I never imagined that a simple HOA complaint would lead to the most horrifying day of my life. My name is David Martinez and I'm a district attorney for the county. For 12 years I've prosecuted criminals and fought for justice. But nothing in my career prepared me for what happened to my innocent 5-year-old daughter, Emma. We moved to Willowbrook Heights 6 months ago, thinking it would be the perfect place to raise Emma. The neighborhood seemed peaceful, with manicured lawns and friendly faces. The houses were beautiful, the streets were clean, and the schools had excellent ratings. Sarah and I had saved for years to afford our dream home here. Our house was a modest two-story colonial with blue shutters and a small front garden. Emma loved the big backyard where she could play with her toys and run around freely. We thought we had found paradise. But we didn't know about Karen Sullivan, the HOA president who ruled our community like a tyrant. Karen was a 60-year-old woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and cold blue eyes that seemed to judge everything around her. She lived 3 houses down from us in a pristine white colonial that looked like a museum. Every blade of grass was perfectly trimmed, every flower was in a straight line, and not a single leaf was out of place. Her husband, Robert, had died 5 years ago from cancer, leaving her alone with nothing but her obsession for neighborhood perfection. Neighbors told us that Karen had changed after his death, becoming bitter and controlling. Before Robert died, she had been friendly and helpful. But grief had twisted her into something dark and angry. Karen had been HOA president for 8 years, and in that time she had created over 200 rules and regulations. She had installed security cameras around the neighborhood and hired a patrol service to enforce her demands. Most residents were too afraid to challenge her because she had the power to fine them or even force them to sell their homes. From day one, Karen made our lives difficult. She complained about our mailbox being 2 inches too tall according to the official HOA standards. She fined us $50 for leaving our trash cans out 30 minutes past pickup time, even though the garbage truck was running late. She even tried to ban Emma from riding her pink bicycle on the sidewalk, claiming it was disturbing the peace. The first time I met Karen was 3 days after we moved in. I was unpacking boxes in the garage when she appeared at the end of our driveway with a clipboard and a measuring tape. "You must be the new residents," she said coldly, not bothering to introduce herself. "I'm here to conduct your initial compliance inspection." She spent 45 minutes measuring everything from our fence height to the distance between our mailbox and the curb. She took photos of our house from every angle and made notes on her clipboard. When Emma came outside to see what was happening, Karen stared at her with obvious disapproval. "Children in this neighborhood are expected to behave appropriately," Karen told me, watching Emma play with her stuffed elephant. "We have noise ordinances and behavioral standards that must be followed." My wife Sarah and I tried to stay patient. We paid the fines, adjusted our mailbox, and followed every ridiculous rule Karen created. We attended HOA meetings where Karen would lecture residents about maintaining standards and preserving property values. We watched her humiliate other families for minor violations. We thought if we kept our heads down and followed her rules, she would eventually leave us alone. We were so wrong. 3 weeks before the incident, Karen's harassment escalated dramatically. She started taking photos of our house at all hours, documenting every minor violation she could find. A garden hose left on the front lawn overnight resulted in a $50 fine. A delivery box left on our porch for 2 hours cost us another $100. When Sarah planted new flowers without getting prior approval, we received a $200 penalty. Karen would walk by our house multiple times each day, always carrying her clipboard and camera. She would stop and stare at our property, looking for any excuse to issue another citation. Our neighbors started avoiding eye contact when they saw her coming, crossing the street to stay out of her way. But Karen's real target was Emma. She would stand at her window with binoculars, watching my daughter play in our backyard. Emma loved to have tea parties with her stuffed animals, creating elaborate stories and speaking in different voices for each character. Her laughter would echo through our yard as she played princess or doctor or teacher with her toys. When Emma's laughter got too loud during her tea parties, Karen would march over and demand we control our disruptive child. She claimed that children's voices were disturbing her peaceful enjoyment of her property. "That little girl needs discipline," Karen told Sarah one afternoon, her voice dripping with contempt. "In my day, children were seen and not heard. You're raising a spoiled brat who thinks the world revolves around her. This is a respectable neighborhood, not a playground." Sarah came home in tears that day. Emma had heard every word through our kitchen window, and I watched my confident, bubbly daughter become quiet and withdrawn. She started asking if she was a bad girl, if that's why the mean lady didn't like her. "Daddy, why doesn't the lady want me to play?" Emma asked me one evening, her big brown eyes filled with confusion. I try to be quiet, but sometimes I forget. Am I being bad? It broke my heart to see my innocent daughter blame herself for Karen's cruelty. Emma started playing more quietly, looking over her shoulder constantly, afraid that Karen might be watching her. The situation got worse when Karen began filing formal complaints with the county about our family. She claimed we were running an illegal daycare because Emma's friends sometimes came over to play. She reported us for noise violations when Emma laughed too loudly. She even called animal control, falsely claiming we had unleashed pets just to cause us trouble. I wanted to confront Karen directly, but Sarah convinced me to take the high road. She's just a lonely, bitter woman, Sarah said. Don't let her drag you down to her level. Think about your career. You can't afford to get into trouble with a neighbor. Sarah was right about my career but wrong about Karen. This wasn't just about loneliness or bitterness. Karen was systematically trying to drive us out of the neighborhood through intimidation and harassment. Other neighbors started sharing their own stories about Karen's behavior. Mrs. Chin told us that Karen had tried to force her to remove her vegetable garden because it lowered property values. The Johnson family had been fined repeatedly for their children's bicycles being visible from the street. The elderly Mr. Peterson had been harassed about his flower boxes until he removed them entirely. She's gotten worse since her husband died, Mrs. Chin confided. Robert used to keep her balanced, but now there's no one to stop her. We're all afraid of her. If only I had listened to my instincts instead of trying to take the high road. If only I had realized how dangerous Karen's obsession was becoming. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October. The autumn air was crisp and the leaves were turning beautiful shades of red and gold. It should have been a perfect day, but it became the worst day of our lives. Sarah had taken a part-time nursing job at the local hospital, working the evening shift from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. The extra income helped with our mortgage payments, and Sarah loved helping patients. She had been at her new job for only 2 weeks and was still adjusting to the schedule. I was stuck in court dealing with a complex murder case involving gang violence. The defense attorney kept objecting to every piece of evidence, and the trial was running much later than expected. What should have been a half-day hearing stretched into the entire afternoon. Our usual babysitter, Mrs. Rodriguez, had canceled at the last minute because her own grandson was sick. Sarah and I had discussed having Emma stay with Mrs. Chin next door, but Emma begged us to let her stay home alone. "I'm a big girl now, Daddy," Emma had said that morning, standing tall in her favorite purple dress with butterflies on it. "I know all the rules. Don't answer the door, don't touch the stove, call you if there's trouble. I can do it." Emma was mature for her age and had always been responsible. She knew how to use the phone, how to lock the doors, and what to do in an emergency. 2 hours alone seemed manageable for such a smart, careful child. I had taught Emma the safety rules a dozen times over the past few weeks, knowing this day might come. Don't answer the door for strangers. Don't touch the stove or any electrical appliances. Keep the doors locked. Call Daddy or Mommy if there's an emergency. If someone tries to get in the house, hide and call 911. She was a smart, responsible kid, and I trusted her to follow the rules for the 2 hours until I got home. Sarah left for work at 2:45 p.m., giving Emma a big hug and reminding her of all the safety rules. I planned to be home by 4:30 p.m. at the latest. At exactly 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from our security system. "Front door motion detected." I figured it was a delivery driver and made a mental note to check when I got home. The security app showed that the motion had stopped, so I assumed whoever it was had left. I was still in the courthouse, listening to closing arguments, completely unaware that my daughter was in terrible danger. If I had known what was happening, I would have dropped everything and raced home. But the security alert seemed routine, just another delivery or solicitor. What I didn't know was that Karen had been watching our house like a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She had noticed Sarah's car leaving at the usual time and my absence from the driveway. She knew Emma was alone, and she saw this as her opportunity to finally teach our family a lesson we would never forget. Karen had noticed Sarah leaving for work and my car absent from the driveway. She saw this as her chance to finally deal with the problem family once and for all. She had spent weeks building a case against us, documenting every perceived violation, planning her final move to force us out of the neighborhood. 4 months, Karen had been telling other HOA board members that our family was destroying the community standards. She claimed we were teaching Emma to disrespect authority and that we were encouraging other families to ignore HOA rules. In her twisted mind, we had become the source of all problems in Willowbrook Heights. She marched up to our front door with a thick folder of complaints and began pounding on the wood with her fist. The sound echoed through our quiet house like thunder. "Open this door right now," Karen shouted, her voice filled with rage. "I know someone's in there. You can't hide from me forever. This ends today." Inside, Emma was coloring at the kitchen table, working on a picture of our family surrounded by flowers. She had been humming quietly to herself, completely absorbed in choosing the perfect colors for each person. When the banging started, she dropped her crayon and looked toward the front door with wide, frightened eyes. Emma had been taught never to open the door for strangers, and Karen definitely counted as a stranger in Emma's mind. The mean lady had never been nice to her, had never smiled at her, had only yelled and complained. So Emma stayed quiet, hoping the person would go away like delivery drivers usually did. But Karen wasn't going away. She continued pounding on the door for several minutes, each bang getting louder and more aggressive. When no one answered, she began circling the house like a predator, peering through windows, trying door handles, looking for any way to get inside. "I know you're in there," Karen screamed as she moved around the house. "You can't ignore me. I'm the HOA president, and you will respect my authority." She pressed her face against our living room window, cupping her hands around her eyes to see inside. When she spotted Emma through the kitchen window, her face twisted with rage and satisfaction. "You little brat," Karen screamed, pressing her palms against the glass so hard that her hands turned white. "I know you can hear me. Open this door right now or you'll be sorry. Your parents think they can ignore me, but I won't let you disrespect me anymore." Emma dropped her coloring book and ran to her room, her little heart pounding with terror. She crawled under her bed and clutched her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Peanuts, against her chest. Mr. Peanuts had been with her since she was a baby, and he always made her feel safe during thunderstorms or when she had bad dreams. But this was scarier than any storm or nightmare. The mean lady was trying to get into their house, and Mommy and Daddy weren't home to protect her. Emma whispered to Mr. Peanuts, "It's okay, Mr. Peanuts. Daddy said never open the door for strangers. We just have to wait for Daddy to come home." But Karen's anger reached a boiling point when she realized the child was deliberately ignoring her commands. In her twisted mind, this 5-year-old child was deliberately defying her authority. She had spent months being disrespected by this family, and she wasn't going to let their spoiled brat make a fool of her in her own neighborhood. What happened next still haunts my nightmares and fills me with a rage so deep that I sometimes can't breathe when I think about it. Karen went back to her house and retrieved something from her late husband's collection. A .38 caliber revolver that she had kept in their bedroom drawer for years. Robert had bought the gun for home protection when they first moved to the neighborhood 20 years ago. After his death, Karen had kept it loaded in the same drawer, though she had never fired a weapon in her life. She had forgotten about it most days, but today her fury gave her a terrible purpose. Karen had reached a breaking point in her obsession with control. In her mind, this wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. This was about a child who dared to disobey her, parents who thought they were above her authority, and a family that had challenged her power in her own neighborhood. She had never fired a gun in her life, but her rage gave her a terrible purpose. In her twisted thinking, she was finally going to teach this family a lesson they would never forget. She was going to show the entire neighborhood what happens when people disrespect Karen Sullivan. When Karen returned to our house with the weapon hidden in her purse, her hands were shaking with adrenaline and anger. She tried the front door one more time, pounding and shouting, but Emma remained hidden and silent. Then Karen walked around to the sliding glass door that led to our patio. She knew this was Emma's usual way in and out of the house because she had been watching our family for months. She had seen Emma run through that door countless times to play in the backyard. Through the glass, she could see Emma's small form hiding behind the couch in our living room. The poor child had left her bedroom because she thought the mean lady had gone away, but now she was trapped in the living room with nowhere to hide. "I see you, you little monster," Karen screamed, her voice so loud that neighbors 3 houses away could hear her. "Come here right now or I'll make you sorry. Your parents aren't here to protect you now." Emma, trembling with fear like a tiny bird, slowly stood up from behind the couch. She had never seen a gun before, but when Karen pulled the weapon from her purse, Emma knew instinctively that it was something dangerous. Her 5-year-old mind couldn't understand why the mean lady wanted to hurt her. Emma started crying, her small voice calling out, "Mommy, Daddy, help me." But her parents were miles away, completely unaware that their daughter was facing a monster. "Please go away," Emma whispered through the glass, her voice barely audible through her tears. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers. Please don't hurt me." That innocent response, that brave little girl following the rules her parents had taught her, was the final trigger for Karen's madness. She raised the gun with both hands, her face twisted with hatred. "You should have opened the door when I told you to," Karen said coldly. "Now you're going to learn what happens to disrespectful children." She fired 2 shots through the sliding glass door. The first bullet shattered the glass into 1,000 pieces, sending razor-sharp fragments flying across our living room. The second bullet found its mark, striking Emma in her left leg just above the knee. My beautiful, innocent daughter collapsed to the floor, screaming in agony as blood pooled beneath her tiny body. The bullet had torn through her small leg, shattering bone and ripping muscle tissue. Emma's screams of pain and terror echoed through the neighborhood, a sound so heartbreaking that it would haunt everyone who heard it for the rest of their lives. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chin, heard the gunshots and Emma's screams from her kitchen window. She immediately dropped the dish she was washing and called 911 while running toward our house to help. When she arrived at our patio, she found a scene that no one should ever witness. Emma was lying on our living room floor, surrounded by broken glass and blood. Her small leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and she was crying so hard that she could barely breathe. The bullet had shattered her femur and torn through muscle and tissue. Karen was standing over my wounded daughter like some kind of evil witch, the smoking gun still in her hand. She showed no emotion, no regret, no horror at what she had just done to an innocent child. "This is what happens when children don't respect their elders," Karen said calmly to Mrs. Chin, as if she had just disciplined a pet instead of shooting a 5-year-old child. "Maybe now this family will learn some manners." Mrs. Chin, a gentle woman who had raised 4 children of her own, felt a rage she had never experienced before. "You shot a baby," she screamed at Karen. "You shot a little girl. What is wrong with you?" But Karen just stood there with a satisfied expression, like she had finally solved a problem that had been bothering her for months. The paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, followed closely by the police. Emma was conscious but in shock, her small body trembling as she cried for her parents. The first responders worked quickly to stop the bleeding and stabilize her tiny leg. "Mommy," Emma whispered to the paramedic, a kind woman named Jessica who had children of her own. "I want my mommy. Did I do something bad? Is that why the lady hurt me?" Jessica had to turn away to hide her tears. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that some adults are simply evil? As they loaded Emma into the ambulance, she was still clutching Mr. Peanuts, her stuffed elephant now stained with her blood. The paramedics let her keep him because they knew she needed something familiar and comforting during the most terrifying experience of her young life. The bullet had missed major arteries by mere millimeters, which probably saved Emma's life. But it had shattered her femur into several pieces and caused severe muscle damage that would require multiple surgeries to repair. I got the call while standing in the courthouse parking lot, finally free from the trial that had kept me away from my daughter when she needed me most. Detective Morrison's voice was gentle but urgent. "Mr. Martinez, this is Detective Morrison with the police department. Your daughter has been shot. She's being taken to St. Mary's Hospital. She's alive, but you need to get there immediately." The world stopped spinning. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered on the asphalt. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart. My 5-year-old daughter had been shot? How was that possible? Who would hurt an innocent child? I dropped my briefcase and ran to my car, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely start the engine. I called Sarah on the way, and her screams over the phone matched the agony in my heart. "Emma's been shot," I told her through my own tears. "She's alive, but she's hurt. Meet me at St. Mary's Hospital." The drive to the hospital was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I kept thinking about Emma's smile that morning, how proud she had been to stay home alone like a big girl. I thought about her purple dress with butterflies and how she had hugged me goodbye, promising to be careful. How had I failed to protect my own daughter? Over the next several days, as Emma fought to recover, the true extent of Karen's obsession and mental deterioration came to light. When police searched her house with a warrant, they discovered a level of surveillance and planning that shocked even experienced investigators. Karen's home office looked like the headquarters of a stalking operation. She had detailed files on every family in the neighborhood, but our file was by far the largest. It contained hundreds of photos of our house taken at different times of day and night. She had pictures of Emma playing in our backyard, pictures of Sarah leaving for work, pictures of me coming home from the courthouse. But the most disturbing discoveries were her handwritten notes and journals. Karen had been documenting our daily routines for months, noting when we left the house, when Emma played outside, even when we ordered takeout food. She knew our schedules better than we did. In one journal entry dated 3 weeks before the shooting, Karen wrote, "The Martinez brat was outside again today making noise and disturbing the peace. Her parents don't care about anyone else in this neighborhood. They think their spoiled child can do whatever she wants. Something needs to be done about this family." Another entry written just days before the attack was even more chilling. I've tried being reasonable with these people, but they refuse to listen. The child is completely out of control, and the parents are enabling her bad behavior. Drastic measures may be necessary to restore order to this community. Detective Morrison showed me page after page of Karen's obsessive documentation. She had recorded the exact times Emma laughed while playing, counted how many times delivery trucks came to our house, and even noted when we forgot to bring in our trash cans promptly. This woman had been planning something like this for weeks, Detective Morrison told me, his voice grim. She had researched home invasion tactics, studied your daily routines, and even practiced with her husband's gun at a remote shooting range outside town. The shooting range records showed that Karen had visited 3 times in the 2 weeks before the attack. The instructor remembered her because she was so nervous and unfamiliar with firearms. He said she kept muttering about teaching people lessons and demanding respect. The most chilling discovery was her diary entry from the morning of the shooting. Today is the day. The Martinez family thinks they can ignore me and let their brat run wild. They need to learn that actions have consequences. If they won't discipline their child, I will. The neighborhood will be better off when people understand that I won't tolerate disrespect. Police also found evidence that Karen had been escalating her harassment of other families as well. She had files on the Johnsons, the Chens, and elderly Mr. Peterson. She had been taking photos through their windows and documenting their activities just like she had done with us. Mrs. Johnson came forward to tell police that Karen had threatened her family just a week before the shooting. She told me that families who don't follow HOA rules would be dealt with accordingly, Mrs. Johnson said. I thought she just meant more fines or complaints. I never imagined she meant violence. The investigation revealed that Karen's mental state had been deteriorating for years since her husband's death. Robert had apparently been the stabilizing force in her life, keeping her controlling tendencies in check. Without him, she had spiraled into paranoia and obsession with power. Her own adult children, who lived in other states, told investigators that they had been worried about their mother's behavior. She had been calling them constantly with complaints about her neighbors, ranting for hours about disrespectful people and declining neighborhood standards. Mom became impossible to talk to after Dad died, Karen's daughter Jennifer told police. Every conversation was about the HOA and how much she hated her neighbors. We tried to get her into therapy, but she refused. She said the problem wasn't her, it was everyone else. During her interrogation, Karen showed no remorse whatsoever. She insisted that she was protecting the neighborhood from undesirable elements, and that Emma had brought this on herself by being disobedient to authority. I gave that child multiple chances to open the door, Karen told detectives coldly, her voice as emotionless as if she were discussing the weather. She chose to defy me, so she faced the consequences. Maybe now that family will learn some respect for authority. When Detective Morrison asked Karen if she understood that she had shot a 5-year-old child, her response was chilling. Age is irrelevant. Disrespect is disrespect. That child needed to learn that actions have consequences. The interrogation recordings would later be played in court, and there wasn't a person in that courtroom who didn't feel sick listening to Karen's cold, calculating responses about shooting my innocent daughter. My daughter spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The bullet had caused extensive damage to her leg muscles and bone. She underwent 3 surgeries to repair the fractures and remove bullet fragments. Watching Emma in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines and tubes, broke something inside me. This vibrant, joyful child who used to dance around our living room could barely move without crying in pain. The physical wounds were just the beginning. Emma developed severe PTSD from the attack. She refused to be alone in any room and would panic at loud noises. The sound of our doorbell would send her into hysterics. Is the mean lady going to come back? Emma asked me one night, her eyes wide with terror. Is she going to hurt me again? I held my daughter close, promising her that Karen would never hurt her again. But inside, I was consumed with a rage that threatened to destroy everything I had worked for. As a district attorney, I had to recuse myself from Karen's prosecution due to the conflict of interest. The case was handed over to the state attorney general's office, but I made sure they understood the severity of what had happened. Karen was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, and breaking and entering. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was defending herself against a perceived threat, but the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution painted a clear picture of a woman who had become obsessed with controlling her neighbors and had finally snapped when a 5-year-old child didn't obey her commands. During the trial, Karen showed no emotion as they displayed photos of Emma's injuries. She sat in her chair with the same cold expression she had worn when terrorizing our family for months. When asked if she regretted shooting Emma, Karen's response chilled everyone in the courtroom. "I regret that the child didn't learn her lesson the easy way. Some people only understand force." News of the shooting spread quickly through our community and beyond. The story of an HOA president shooting a 5-year-old for not opening the door shocked people across the country. Within hours, it was trending on social media, with people expressing outrage and disbelief that such a thing could happen in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Our neighbors, who had remained silent during months of Karen's harassment and intimidation, finally found their voices. They came forward in droves to share their own stories of her tyrannical behavior, her threats, and her increasingly erratic conduct. "We all knew Karen was unstable," said Mr. Peterson, who lived next door to her. He was a 70-year-old retired teacher who had been terrorized by Karen for years. She had been getting worse since her husband died, but none of us thought she would actually hurt a child. We were all too scared to stand up to her. Mr. Peterson revealed that Karen had been harassing him for 3 years about his flower boxes, claiming they violated HOA aesthetic standards. She had fined him repeatedly and threatened to force him to sell his home if he didn't comply with her demands. "She told me that old people who can't maintain their properties properly should move to nursing homes," Mr. Peterson said, tears in his eyes. "She made my life miserable, but I never spoke up because I was afraid she would make things worse." The Johnson family shared their own horror stories about Karen's behavior. She had been photographing their children through their bedroom windows, claiming she needed evidence of noise violations. She had called Child Protective Services on them multiple times with false reports of neglect and abuse. "Karen destroyed our peace of mind," Mrs. Johnson told reporters. "Our kids were afraid to play in their own backyard because they knew she was watching them. We started closing all our curtains and keeping the children inside most of the time." Even more disturbing stories emerged. The Chen family revealed that Karen had been leaving threatening notes in their mailbox for months. The notes contained racial slurs and demands that they go back where they came from because their vegetable garden was un-American. "She told us that people like us were ruining the neighborhood character," Mrs. Chen said through tears. "She said our food smells and our children were too loud. We started cooking with all the windows closed because we were afraid of her complaints." The young Cooper family, who had moved in just 6 months before us, revealed that Karen had been spreading false rumors about them throughout the neighborhood. She had told other residents that Mr. Cooper was dealing drugs because he worked from home and received frequent deliveries. "She nearly destroyed my husband's reputation and his business," Mrs. Cooper said. "People started avoiding us because of her lies. We were planning to move because we couldn't handle her harassment anymore." As more and more stories came out, a pattern emerged. Karen had been systematically terrorizing families for years, targeting anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of acceptable neighbors. She had driven at least 6 families out of the neighborhood through her campaigns of harassment and intimidation. The HOA board members who had enabled Karen's behavior for years suddenly came forward with their own accounts. Board member Tom Williams admitted that they had all been afraid of Karen's retaliation if they challenged her authority. "Karen had dirt on everyone in the neighborhood," Williams confessed. "She had been collecting information and photos for years, and she used it to blackmail anyone who opposed her. We knew she was going too far, but we were cowards. We should have stopped her years ago." The HOA board immediately removed Karen from her position and issued a public apology to our family and all the other families she had harassed. They also established new policies to prevent future harassment and created a fund to help with Emma's medical expenses. But the community support, while appreciated, couldn't heal the trauma that Karen had inflicted on our innocent daughter and our family. The damage was done, and we would be dealing with the consequences for years to come. Local news stations interviewed dozens of neighbors, and the picture that emerged was of a woman who had been allowed to terrorize an entire community because people were too afraid to stand up to her. The story became a cautionary tale about what happens when one person is given too much power without proper oversight or accountability. The most heartbreaking moment of the trial came when Emma had to testify via video link from our home. The judge had ruled that she was too traumatized to appear in court, but her testimony was crucial to the case. Sitting on my lap, wearing her favorite purple dress, Emma told the court about that terrible day in her own words. "The mean lady was banging on our door really loud," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared, so I hid like Daddy taught me. But she kept yelling at me and saying bad words." When the prosecutor asked her about the shooting, Emma's lower lip trembled. "There was a really loud noise and then my leg hurt really, really bad. I thought I was going to die. I wanted my mommy and daddy." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the bailiff was wiping away tears as my brave little girl recounted the most traumatic experience of her young life. Karen's lawyer had no questions for Emma. How do you cross-examine a 5-year-old victim of your client's inexcusable violence? After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Karen Sullivan was found guilty on all charges. The evidence was too overwhelming, her lack of remorse too obvious, and the severity of her crime too shocking for any other outcome. At sentencing, the judge spoke directly to Karen with barely contained disgust. "Mrs. Sullivan, in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen such a senseless act of violence against an innocent child. You took out your petty grievances and personal demons on a 5-year-old girl who was simply following her parents' safety instructions. Your actions have forever changed this child's life and traumatized an entire community. You have shown no remorse, no understanding of the gravity of your crime, and no recognition of the pain you have caused." Karen received 25 years to life in prison. At 60 years old, it was essentially a life sentence. As they led her away in shackles, Karen turned to look at our family one last time. Instead of remorse, I saw only bitter resentment in her eyes, as if we were somehow to blame for her downfall. It's been 8 months since the shooting, and Emma is slowly healing. Her leg has healed well enough for her to walk normally, though she still experiences pain on cold days. The doctors say she may always have a slight limp, but she's young and resilient. The emotional healing has been much harder. Emma still has nightmares about the mean lady, and requires therapy twice a week. She's afraid of our sliding glass door and refuses to be in the living room alone. But my daughter is incredibly brave. She started kindergarten and made new friends who don't know about her trauma. She's learning to trust again, to laugh again, to be a child again. Sarah and I have our own healing to do. The guilt of leaving Emma alone that day, even for just a few hours, weighs heavily on our hearts. We've both started therapy to deal with our own trauma and to learn how to better support Emma. We've also become advocates for stricter HOA regulations and better screening processes for community leadership positions. No other family should have to endure what we went through because of one person's unchecked power and mental instability. Karen Sullivan thought she was above the law. She believed her position as HOA president gave her the right to harass, intimidate, and ultimately harm my family. She was wrong. Justice was served, but the scars remain. Every time I see Emma struggling with her physical therapy, every time she wakes up screaming from nightmares, every time she flinches at a sudden noise, I'm reminded of how one person's hate and delusion can destroy innocent lives. But I'm also reminded of the strength of the human spirit. Emma's courage in the face of unimaginable trauma inspires me every day. She refuses to let Karen's evil define her life. To anyone dealing with harassment from HOA officials or neighbors, please don't stay silent like we did. Document everything, report threats to police, and never underestimate how dangerous an unstable person can become. And to those in positions of power in their communities, remember that your role is to serve and protect, not to intimidate and control. The badge, the title, or the position doesn't make you superior to your neighbors, it makes you responsible for their well-being. Karen Sullivan learned this lesson too late. She sits in a prison cell today, her life ruined by her own hatred and cruelty. Meanwhile, my daughter continues to heal and grow, surrounded by love and protected by justice. The mean lady can never hurt Emma again. And that's a victory worth celebrating, even in the midst of our ongoing pain. Today, Emma is 6 years old. She still has bad days, but she also has wonderful days filled with laughter and joy. She's learned to ride her bike again, though she stays far away from the sidewalk where Karen used to watch her. We've moved to a new neighborhood with a kind, reasonable HOA and neighbors who care about each other rather than controlling each other. Emma has made friends who know nothing about her trauma, allowing her to just be a normal kid. Sometimes when I'm tucking her into bed, Emma will ask me about forgiveness. "Daddy, do I have to forgive the mean lady?" I tell her that forgiveness is something that comes with time and healing, and that it's okay if she's not ready yet. What matters is that she doesn't let Karen's hate make her hateful. "I don't hate her, Daddy," Emma told me recently. "I just feel sorry for her. She must have been very sad inside to want to hurt a little girl." My daughter's wisdom and compassion continue to amaze me. Despite everything Karen put her through, Emma has chosen love over hate, hope over fear. Karen Sullivan thought she could break my family. Instead, she made us stronger, more grateful for each other, and more determined to stand up against bullies and tyrants. Justice was served. Love prevailed. And Emma's beautiful spirit shines brighter than ever before.